Morning everybody, Luke with Reata Ranch here. I'm in Mesa, Arizona today, and Rufus is down here in Arizona with me. You can see him in the background. And I've put 5.5 days of training on him, 1.5 to 2 hours a day. So today's the 6th day. I've had 5 full days, and today's the 6th day. I put about a half an hour into him this morning. So I just wanted to show everybody how he's doing. This is the untrainable horse. This is the horse that the owner was afraid of, and didn't recommend at all that I should be training him. So I thought that maybe we could work with him. He looked like he just had some issues of being frightened and running when he did get frightened. So I'm going to show you the progression of exercises that I go through with him, and up to this point anyway, and just show you kind of how he's doing. You'll see the progress that he's made. And then we're going to be making a video about every week to show you the progress until he's fully trained. So here we go. My wife's going to be filming what I'm doing today, and we'll get going. Okay, I'm starting out with some round pinning. Especially in the first couple weeks of training, I usually start out with some round pinning. Part of that gets the energy out of the horse so that he calms down a little bit. It gets him respectful and gets him to use his thinking side of his brain. So I just help a horse get a little more relaxed and a little more responsive to me and paying attention to me. Like I've mentioned before, when I'm round pinning, typically I like to keep the horse at a canter. So if he slows down to a trot, I'll point and ask him to move into a canter. And then when he turns and goes the other direction, I want to make sure that he faces me to do so. If he turns the other way and doesn't face me and shows me his hind end, then I'm going to push him in the same direction. But he's to the point now where he doesn't turn his back end towards me. He's always, when I step in front of him and ask him to change directions, he gives me 2 eyes and then moves in the other direction if I ask him. Now I've got him now following me without a lead rope. And as you can see, he's quite calm. So I got him to follow me into the center of the round pin, and then I'm desensitizing a little bit with my hands. I like to go over all of his body, rub him down some. Now in this instance, he's had enough training to where I want him to stay in the center of the round pin. So I asked him to come to me and go into the middle of the round pin and then stay there. Well, he started to follow me, so I just asked him to back up and stay there, which he did. Now if you notice right there, I went and got the halter and lead rope, and Rufus started to walk off on me. I want to show you all the mistakes that he makes so that I can show you the progression of his exercises and his behavior and the improvement over time. So he started to walk off when I was approaching him with the halter and lead rope. So I just stepped in front of him, asked him to come towards me, and then asked him to follow me back to the center of the round pin. Now he's in the center again. I have the halter and lead rope, and I'm going to put it on him. Now I'll repeat myself a lot in all the videos that I make, but there's a purpose for that. I want to make sure that while I'm showing you how I train, how the horse is progressing, I also want to give you some tips on what to do. And if you're paying attention to my putting the halter on Rufus, I asked him to lower his head when I put the halter on. I want all my horses to lower their heads enough so that I can easily put the halter on, or that some 10-year-old girl like my daughter can easily put the halter on, or take it off, or put a bridle on and take it off. And now I'm doing some lunging activity. I started out with a trot. Once a horse gets really good at lunging, I'll just go directly into a canter from the get-go. But I like to start out at a trot so that I can yield those hindquarters, yield the forequarters, and make sure that he's responding correctly. There, he didn't quite yield his hindquarters enough, so I had to step around and ask him to yield one more time. Now yield the forequarters. Now right there, I wanted to show you this mistake that he made. So I didn't ask him to turn back the other way, but for some reason, and he felt like I was stepping in front of him a little bit. Maybe I was. I could have been me that made that mistake. But at any rate, he misread my cue, and he started going back the other way when I didn't ask him to. So I just kept my feet still. I kept pointing in the direction that I wanted him to go, and just let him correct his own mistake as I stood there. And now he's going into a canter. Yield the hindquarters. And he's drifting some when I'm yielding the hindquarters here, so he's not perfect. He also puts a little bit of pressure on the lead line, and I'm having to emphasize rounding himself out and yielding to the pressure of that lead rope. All horses, when they're first learning to lunge, will put pressure on that lead and make it kind of challenging. They want to, as they're going around in the circle, the natural tendency is to move away and point their nose away from me and out of the circle. That's where the momentum is going. Yield the forequarters. There's a couple times right there where he was going in the correct direction, but he was actually crossfiring his feet. So he wasn't on the correct lead. He was on the correct lead in the front, but not on the back. Now there I wanted to show you that mistake that he made, and that was I went to yield his forequarters and he didn't respond to me. I stepped in front of him, he didn't respond, and there he was drifting as well. But I had to get a little bit more aggressive and pull on that lead rope. And he's just struggling a little bit with yielding the forequarters. Now that was much better. I stepped in front of him, pointed the other direction. He changed directions and went the other way very well. And that was 2 good yields, one to the right, one to the left. I let him slow down to a trot, yielded his hindquarters. Now I'm going to bring him into me, rub him a little between the eyes, and desensitize with the string. Keep in mind that whenever you sensitize a horse, or you get a horse to move, you're asking him to move his feet. That's called sensitizing. Or I could simply call it moving exercises. Once you do that, a horse becomes a little bit more reactive to that stick and string because you're using it to ask him to move forward. So after you do that, you always need to desensitize with the same object, stick and string or whatever it is that you're using. Now here, I like to start by desensitizing at that 45-degree angle from his shoulder, and then I move to his side. and eventually I moved behind him and then close behind him. So it's a progression of desensitizing. And what I was doing is moving towards his side and desensitizing, and he was kind of yielding his forequarters and trying to face me when I was desensitizing. It's an honest mistake that he made. He's trying. He thinks that I want him to give me his two eyes, when in this case I don't. So I just yielded his forequarters back away from me when he did that. So the goal here is I'm trying to get him to keep his feet still while I'm desensitizing him from the side. Now I move to his right side, start desensitizing from that 45-degree angle from his shoulder. Now I moved towards his side and he started to walk away. So I'm yielding his forequarters, asking him to stand still. Now I keep a hold of the rope, the long lead rope, initially when I'm doing this to make sure that I can correct him if he tries to move away. And now I'm nearly at a 45-degree angle from his hindquarters. And he's doing good, so I move on to the next exercise. Now this is another sensitizing exercise or moving exercise. And I just call it lead beside, where I'm asking him to trot forward and keep parallel to me. I'm walking forward and my inside leg is kind of crossing my outside leg so that I stay parallel to his head in his direction. Now initially this exercise can be a little challenging for a horse to try to understand. He's picked it up pretty good and was doing quite well with that. So that was a moving exercise or a sensitizing exercise, and now I'm desensitizing with something else, and that's this black trash bag. You can desensitize with anything, absolutely anything. I desensitize with my hands, I desensitize with a stick and string, I desensitize with lots of plastic bags, trash bags, anything that moves and makes noise, I'm desensitizing with. And he's doing quite well. I can rub him anywhere on his body and he's not overreacting to it. I asked him to move to the other side and desensitizing from that side with the trash bag. Desensitizing over his head is always the last thing that I do. You want to desensitize on the sides first. The head is the most reactive part of the horse. So initially when you try to put a plastic bag close to a horse's face, there's not too many horses that like that. They get quite reactive with that. After desensitizing in standing still, then I increase the speed, which is, as I've mentioned, as you increase the speed, you increase the difficulty level. The horse will automatically become more reactive to whatever object you're desensitizing as you increase the speed. So the faster the horse is moving, the harder it is for that horse to use the thinking side of his brain. He becomes more and more reactive and using the reactive side of his brain. And right here I'm doing some lateral flexion, just showing how well he's doing with that. Rufus is an excellent lateral flexor. Now I'm doing some body-to-body contact, which is part of the Jeffrey method. Keep in mind that I don't use all of the Jeffrey method, but I do use this portion of it because it's that body-to-body contact that helps a horse become comfortable with me, first of all, with all the contact from me to him, and also with me being on top of him. He's doing very well with it. I'm desensitizing with my hands when I'm on top of him. Horses can get quite reactive around the barrel area, the cinch area, and the flanks. Now we're going to saddle. So I desensitize a little bit with the blanket initially, make sure he's not reacting to that blanket. If a horse is flinching when I'm tapping him with the blanket, I'll continue to do that until he stops flinching. Now just notice the calm demeanor of Rufus as I'm saddling him. You'll notice I don't have him tied up. I like to saddle all my horses when I'm training them ground tied. There's a couple reasons for that. One is to teach them that they shouldn't be moving. I don't want any pressure. I don't want them to cause any pressure through the lead rope when I'm cinching them up. Now there, as I started to cinch him up on the front cinch, he started to walk off. If you notice that, he started walking forward. So I took hold of the lead rope and I backed him up. And I started to cinch him again. I took hold of the lead rope, or he moved forward. So I took a hold of the lead rope, backed him up. I'm getting him to move his feet quickly. This is teaching him that he shouldn't move when I'm saddling him. I think he feels a little bit of pressure from the cinch, and his girth area is a little sensitive. But if I make him move his feet when he moves his feet, and I want him standing still, then he starts to realize what I want from him, and that's to stand still. Basically, I'm saying, hey, you want to move your feet? I'll make you move your feet. It becomes my idea, not his. And pretty soon he realizes, hey, if I keep my feet still, he's not going to make me move my feet, make me work. And right there, if you noticed, he made another mistake and started going the other direction when I didn't ask him to. And we're doing a little fast forward motion here. I just went through the same lunging exercises as I did without the saddle on. Now initially there he goes again, he tried to come back the other way. I just kept my feet still, pointed in the same direction, asked him to go the same way, and he went the right way. Yielding his forequarters and hindquarters. So I do the same lunging activity without the saddle on and with the saddle on. Now there's just a few ways that I ask him to back up to show me respect when I'm looking to him and asking him to back up. I want him to back up. right here. I'm shaking the rope and getting him to back up off of that pressure. This is kind of a marching motion to get him to back up off of that pressure. And now I'm asking him to back up, which is the pressure on the lead rope downward and toward his chest. And he's doing pretty good. Now I'm doing the lead beside again, this time with the saddle on. If you add something to a horse's back, or you increase the speed of what the horse is doing, that's going to make it more challenging for the horse. So when I add the saddle to his back, I want to go through the same exercises I did without the saddle. And again, this is a pass-through exercise. So I ask him to come through, I ask him to yield his hindquarters and face me. And now what I'm doing is getting him to side pass. So the pass-through exercise actually, you can transition from that exercise to side passing quite easily. So I pass through, yield the hindquarters, point towards the fence, and walk towards him. Whatever you're going to do in the saddle, make sure you do it on the ground first. That's a rule of thumb that you should never forget. If you try something in the saddle that you haven't tried on the ground first, you're asking for trouble. So I want to teach him to side pass when I'm on the ground. And I'm desensitizing with the stick and string. And then I'm desensitizing with a plastic bag or the trash bag. Notice that I'm doing the same things. Again, I'm repeating the same things with the saddle on him. Now he was a little bit overreactive here. He wasn't overreactive going to his right without the saddle. But with the saddle and the trash bag slapping onto the saddle, that noise and how that made him feel caused him to be overreactive. So I had to keep up that pressure until he stopped overreacting to it. Now this is something I couldn't do without a saddle because I didn't have stirrups. But I'm just slapping the stirrups on the side of him, making sure he's getting comfortable with that movement and that pressure from the stirrups. I want him to not overreact to a stirrup flopping on top of him or underneath him or on the side of him. Because every once in a while, well, when I'm moving my feet in the stirrup, when I'm on top of him, if I haven't desensitized to those stirrups on the ground, their horses will overreact to that, and it could cause a big wreck. Remember, whatever you're going to do in the saddle, make sure you do it on the ground first. And after getting on, I do some lateral flexion. I always laterally flex when I first get on and before I'm going to get off a horse. We want to work on that lateral flexion, that lateral suppleness. That is key to horse movement. And now I'm doing some vertical suppleness, vertical flexion. I want him to drop his neck a little bit and bend at the poll. And he's doing exactly what I'm asking him to. Now I'm going to laterally flex and then get him to move his hindquarters by putting my heel on close to his flank. If he doesn't come off of that pressure, I have to bump him a little bit with my heel. And I'll keep that pressure on until he moves around, moves his hindquarters. Now here he's kind of moving his forequarters as well. And so I'm keeping that pressure on to get him to move that hindquarters over. Now I'm moving the hindquarters to the right. He did a little bit better at this if you can pay attention to how he's stepping with his feet. His left hind steps in front of his right hind. And Rufus was quite easy to get into a trot. His canter, I wasn't able to get him into a canter on this ride, but he's trotting quite comfortably. And as you can tell, I'm waving my arm, I'm slapping my leg. I'll slap my chest, slap my leg, slap the saddle, make a lot of noise with my mouth, make a lot of shh sounds, all kinds of variations of those kind of sounds. What I want is to always remind that horse that I'm on top of him and always be desensitizing, especially early on in riding. If you don't desensitize on a nearly constant basis on top of the horse, he'll forget you're up there. I know it sounds odd, but he'll forget you're up there if you're quiet, if you're not saying anything, and before you know it, if you make a quick movement or make a noise, it could cause a wreck, could cause the horse to explode, because he kind of just forgets that you're up there. So you got to constantly desensitize when you're up there, especially in those first few rides. Remind him that you're up there. You want this horse to be nice and relaxed and comfortable with you being on top of him. That is not a natural thing for a horse to do. A horse doesn't naturally want some large animal on top of them. And we're the ultimate predator and we're sitting on top of this horse. So it's very unnatural for a horse. And what I was doing is I was doing rollbacks against the fence as I was riding around. And now I'm teaching him to back up. So I want him to yield at the pole, to yield vertically, and then to step backwards. As soon as he did that, I released the pressure. Now I'm working in a figure 8 pattern. So I was doing rollbacks against the fence initially, and now I'm just working into a figure 8 pattern. That's typically the second type of motion that I ask him to do during my first couple of rides. Most of that pressure in the rein is coming from the inside rein. But I'm also laying the outside rein on him. So I sat, asked him to stop, asked him to back up. And although he's a little bit reactive to the bit and a little sensitive in his mouth, he did pretty good. What I'm doing there is just getting him to yield his forequarters. Well, this was a great day, day 6 of Rufus's training. We had a great time. I really am enjoying this horse. He's going to be a great horse. He was considered dangerous and untrainable, but this horse is certainly not that. He's doing really well, and we look forward to more days of training and getting him to be more responsive and making him just a great horse and fulfilling his potential. What that he has a lot of potential, and we can't wait to find that potential. And we look forward to eventually getting him to another owner who's going to be able to use him. We think he has a capacity to do a lot of things. I think he's strong enough and quick enough that he could be just about anything somebody wanted him to be. I think he could be a roper. He might have enough speed to be a barrel racer for somebody. He could be a show horse, a great trail horse. He's a lot of fun. I enjoyed training Rufus, and I look forward to many more great days of training with him.